Good evening to everyone. Hello, Tony. Hello, Smokey. Thanks for being here with me on my second debate on my channel, The God Talk. I hope we can have a nice conversation, and I hope that the audience will enjoy our chat. Um,
Beautiful. I guess if you just want to hand it over to me, then
yeah,
Otangelo, that's fine. I'm going to be acting as moderator for the debate today, ladies and gentlemen. So let's give certainly some appreciation to both of our guests for being here and arranging this conversation. Thank you so much to both of you, gentlemen. Tony, would you like to give yourself a little bit of a plug? Do you have a YouTube channel or anything you'd like to shout out, or maybe just a brief little introduction? We can let the audience know who you are. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, by the way. There
All
you
right,
go.
how about that?
okay.
There you go. Now you're good.
Sorry about that. All right. Well, thank you. My name's Tony Reed. I appropriately have a channel called Tony Reed, and I host a show called How Creationism Taught Me Real Science. And essentially, in every episode, I take on a creationist argument of some sort. I don't necessarily determine whether evolution or creation is right or wrong at the end, but at the end, usually the creationist argument is wrong, even if creationism would be right. So anyway, that's my channel. I also play the voice of God on a show or on a channel called Prophet of Zod, and that's essentially what I'm doing these days.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well,
I
thank
have
you for
linked
that
your
introduction.
channel. Yeah, I have linked your channel at the description here, so anyone
Beautiful.
can access and have a look.
There we
at
go.
it, okay?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen that find the video, if you'd like any extra information for Tony or go check out his channel, please do so. Link is in the description for you. We have a basic kind of open format here planned where we're going to do kind of around about 10-minute openings or so. We won't be real strict about it. Each one get the chance to kind of make their points and present their case. And then we're going to move into a general kind of open conversation format. You won't find me really interjecting unless it seems to get off topic or out of hand in any regard. But certainly I know both of you seem to be pretty respectable gentlemen. So I picture I'll just be sitting here doing a whole bunch of nothing but enjoying the show. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take it with our first opening. Now, did you want me to go ahead and do a coin flip, or does someone want to volunteer to take opening or affirmative position?
I can take the first. I can make the first introduction and then give it to Tony.
Beautiful.
Okay?
And Tony, is that fair to you? Do you concede to that? I'll take the head nod. The head nod would work. Okay, that'll work. Okay, sounds good. All right, Otangelo, sir, whenever you start talking, I'll begin the clock. You have 10 minutes.
All right, thank you, Smokey. I accepted Tony's suggestion to debate the topic real-world applications of evolution and creation, but not with the purpose to meet that challenge and provide a number of examples where scientific predictions have been made based on creationism and then confirmed. While they exist, my purpose in this debate is to put some things straight. I suppose I might be wrong with that Tony thinks that if that challenge is not met as he expects, that means that evolution tops creationism because it has apparently more explanatory power. But I think a very important distinction has to be made here. I hear very often that creationism or intelligent design is not science. Since still today, many adopt empiricism as an epistemological framework of truth finding in regards of origins, that would imply that creationism is not true. These are all, in my view, straw man questions and assertions. Science asks two relevant questions. One is how things work, and the other is how did things probably come to be and to exist. One is operational science, and the second is historical science. Creationism is based on a worldview that explains our existence of a unique creation event in the past, where God created the physical universe, life, and biodiversity. Cosmological, chemical, and biological evolution, on the other hand, tries to explain our history and answer the same question without invoking a deity. Events that have eventually occurred only once in the past do not need to be repeated and neither require that testable predictions are made. So the creation versus evolution debate is about if what we have discovered in the natural world leads us either to intelligent design or natural mechanisms as the best explanation of how things came to be. Tony can of course claim that upon my admission he won the case, but my only concern is how we can best explain why there is something rather than nothing. If creationism does and can make successful scientific predictions, is entirely irrelevant to the case if creationism is compelling or not. So I do not see this as a debate about science versus religion. The evidence in the natural world is the same for all of us. When the question is about origins, the issue is how can we best explain our existence in a philosophical manner. It is not about proving things. Nobody has a time machine to go back and see what happened deep far in the past. Science judges the merits of competing models in terms of their simplicity, clarity, comprehensiveness, and fit to the data. Creationism is not about making scientific predictions, but either post-predictions confirm the creation account in Genesis or not. Creationism permits drawing inferences in regards to religious claims, which shapes our worldview, our moral values, and meaning. The claim made by Tony in another debate with Nephilim Free is that creationism has no scientific application. It is evident that if a creator indeed exists, he is supremely more intelligent than we are. And as such, we can observe how things in the natural world work, which was actually the driving force of almost all science fathers, which were Christians, and attempted to understand the world we live in. Our observations can help us advance our modern world by imitating what is observed in the natural world, in all cases, far more sophisticated than what humans have invented so far. We see practical application in biomimetics, and Nephilim Free has given several examples, and I can eventually add a few more in the debate. Predictions to which I can give a link, and the audience can have a look. And Philip Squell wrote in New Scientist, the modern form of Darwin's theory has been raised to its present high status because of its said to be the cornerstone of modern experimental biology.
By the way, Otangelo, you might want to
most just can conduct their work quite.
Otangelo, can you repeat that last bit? You've been cutting out a little bit here and there. It seems like maybe you. I'm sorry. I apologize, but it seems like you were just cutting in and out. I'm not sure if we were catching all of that. Can you just start back at that last couple sentences? Sorry. Yeah, because it was completely lost.
I thought it was me,
no, I heard it too. So you definitely were dropping in and out there a little bit. So maybe go back a few sentences and start over again.
Okay. At the same time, there are a number of falsified evolutionary predictions to which I can give a link later on in the debate, and the audience can have a look. And Philip Squell wrote in the New Scientist in 2005. Despite this and other difficulties, the modern form of Darwin's theory has been raised to its present high status because it's said to be the cornerstone of modern experimental biology. But is that correct? Most can conduct their work quite happily without particular reference to evolutionary ideas. My own research with antibiotics during World War II received no guidance from insights provided by Darwinian evolution, nor did Alexander Fleming's discovery of bacterial inhibition by penicillin. I recently asked more than 70 eminent researchers if they would have done their work differently if they had thought Darwin's theory was wrong, and the responses were all the same, no. But more smacking than that, The thing is that common ancestry and macroevolution are false, and never, in over 100 years since Darwin's book On the Origin of Species was published, has even one amongst hundreds of thousands, or if not millions of science papers, provided one demonstration and empirical, verifiable, replicable evidence that any of the evolutionary mechanisms proposed could produce a primary macroevolutionary transition zone of speciation and population differentiation, with the rise of new body plans. So what is an evolutionary novelty? I would give as examples photosynthesis, wings, legs, flowers, eyes, hearts, and the origin of Hox's genes. Evolution, as probably understood by Tony, but certainly by many atheists, is more than just an attempt to explain biodiversity. It is and foremost as well a metaphysical program with the attempt to explain reality without a creator. And as such, evolution is presented as an overarching materialistic worldview that tops creationism in explanatory power. I will demonstrate that the advance of the scientific endeavor, rather than explaining the origin of things more and more by natural means, like unguided random events, physical necessity, and evolution, is demonstrating that the world we live in is far more complex than originally thought, like in Darwin's and Thomas Huxley's times. And life is based and depends on instructional complex information and irreducible and interdependent machines and molecular cell factories and computers, and as such demonstrates the imprints of an intelligent designer. About 100 years ago, scientists thought our galaxy constituted the entire universe. The scientific consensus was that the universe was static and eternal. The beginning of the universe in Big Bang was not even remotely suspected. But in the 30s, Lemaitre proposed what later became known as the Big Bang theory, with the implication that the universe had a beginning. Today, the Big Bang theory is consensus amongst astrophysicists. We find, therefore, scientific advance perfectly confirming what the Bible says for millennia. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1 explains the origin of vegetation, plants, the origin of animals, the origin of humankind, male and female, and the origin of the soul. Darwinian thought comes from the Victorian era, from the time where it was believed that biological cells could come from some warm little pond, ready to undergo still more complex changes. So basically, from the prehistory of biological sciences, where nobody had any idea of what was going on. And Haeckel thought that biological cells are mere structureless protoplasm. He wrote in 1871 in Nature magazine, "The simplest independent organisms, which we know, consist in fact of a structureless bit of protoplasm." Today, we know better. Cells are not simple structureless bits of protoplasm, but of paralleled gigantic complexity, a city hosting billions of interconnected chemical factories, unimaginable for the human mind. Shall I repeat that last sentence?
Oh yeah, was that it? Was that your finishing? I'm sorry.
No, I'm not finishing yet.
Okay, well you're at the 10-minute mark, just to let you know. So probably try to start wrapping it up. Okay.
Yeah, it's not very more
okay.
2 minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Full of computers, information machines, and factories, fully automated, robot-like operated, enormously well suited to adapt to the environment. Such things come undoubtedly from a super intelligent creator and confirm the Genesis account. No scientific experiment has been able to come even close to synthesize the basic building blocks of life and reproduce a self-replicating cell in the laboratory through self-assembly and autonomous organization. When the Miller-Urey experiment was made in the 50s, the hope was that in a predictable future, the riddle of how life would emerge would be solved. That prediction has not been met. Rather than coming closer to explain how life emerged, what science has unraveled is that the task is in the realm of the not solvable by natural unguided means. Darwin claimed that all life forms originate from a common ancestor, a view that is still held by a majority of evolutionary biologists. But evidence demonstrates that this is not conceivable in face of the huge differences between the three domains of life. I can list at least 6 issues that refute the claim of common ancestry. Based on evidence seen in biochemistry on a molecular level, we can now say that Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection in regards to primary speciation and macroevolutionary level has been falsified. The real mechanisms that explain biodiversity, complex organismal architecture, is pre-programmed instructional complex information encoded in various genetic and epigenetic languages and communication by various signaling codes through various signaling networks. Finished.
Okay, beautiful. I was just over 12 minutes. Okay, beautiful. Tony, sir, feel free. Aim around 10, 12 minutes, right around there. Feel free to take as much as Otangelo did. You won't get cut short. So feel free by all means. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock.
Okay. Well, can you give me like a 2 minutes heads up to wrap up? I probably
Absolutely.
won't go the full 12, but
not
if
a
I
problem.
do.
You got it. No worries.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for having this debate. I appreciate it very much. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you, Otangelo. As you know who I am already, so I won't introduce myself, but the topic of the debate today is whether evolution or creationism has more scientific application. And for the purpose of this debate, I'm just going to work on the assumption that evolution is 100% wrong and that creationism is 100% correct. In fact, I'm not even going to try to get anyone to stop believing in creationism. What I am going to do is demonstrate that even if creationism were 100% correct, it is still scientifically useless. And even if evolution is 100% wrong, it still has scientific applications that you take advantage of every day. Now, that said, I just want you to understand, I am not here to change your mind as to whether creationism is true. I'm simply discussing the scientific applications of it. And when we discuss scientific evidence for a theory, we're not claiming that any theory is ever proven. We're not just discussing individual phenomena that happen to be consistent with the theory. What we are talking about is the confirmation of scientific predictions made by the theory. And this is how new discoveries and real-world applications are made all the time. Predictions are in turn presented in the form of a hypothesis. And very simply, it goes like this. If theory A is true, we should expect to see phenomenon B when we conduct experiment or observation C. So the next obvious step is to conduct experiment or observation C and determine whether you find or see phenomenon B just as theory A predicted. Now, there's no record of any creationists ever making predictions about fossils before the first fossil was ever discovered. But it's very easy to see fossils in the ground and then say you predicted it all along. It's a completely different thing entirely to predict something that has never been seen before and then find it. And we can do that, contrary to what Otangelo says, with the assumption of common ancestry, our common descent. So that said, the difference between creationism and evolution here is that the evolutionary theories have predicted these specific fossils in very specific strata, in very specific locations before they were ever discovered. So, for example, and this is just going to be an example, in 1881, the lobefish Eusthenepteron was found in 385 million year strata. And then following that, In 1932, Ichthyostega was discovered in 365 million-year-old strata. Now, already, neither of these were discovered by testing an evolutionary prediction. But using the theory of common descent, Edward B. Deschler, Neil H. Shubin, and Farish Jenkins were able to predict ahead of time that they should expect to find a fossil of a creature which appeared to have wrist bones similar to tetrapods and yet rays similar to finned fishes, with spiracles in the head, which would be indicative of a lung system with a pectoral girdle separating the head from the body with a neck. And they predicted that this morphological combination of tetrapod and fish-like traits would be found in Devonian strata between Ichthyostega and Eustheneptron on Ellesmere Island in Nunavut in northern Canada. And wouldn't you know it, 5 years of excavation, they found no less than 3 individuals matching those exact traits. And these individuals were named Tiktaalik. Now, whenever you see any of these timelines of tetrapod to mammal evolution, land-dwelling mammals to whales and dolphins, horses, or even human evolution, this same assumption has told scientists where to look stratigraphically as well as geographically for thousands of these individual fossil species showing transitional traits. Common descent has repeatedly made and continues to make these kinds of predictions, but you will not see the assumption of a worldwide flood or a 6-day creation event used to find any newly discovered fossil species. Now, a lot of creations have proposed that there are 6 definitions for evolution. I don't really want to go into those, but I do want to talk about uniformitarianism, which I think should be a new definition for evolution if you're going to be making arguments like that. I'm not saying Otangelo has, but uniformitarianism, which requires an old Earth, is used every day by geologists to predict where to find minerals like oil, coal, gas, etc. So if you drive a car, you are benefiting from the scientific application of assuming an old Earth. To date, again, no geologist has ever discovered any of these materials by assuming a worldwide flood. Okay, let's go to this one. Whew. Big Bang, huh? Well, there's a couple little technicalities I want to go about. Most people talk about Georges Lemaitre, who popularized the theory. He was himself a creationist. Contrary to popular belief, though, the Big Bang Theory wasn't proposed by Georges Lemaitre. It was actually proposed by Alexander Friedman in 1922, and then it was rediscovered by Lemaitre in 1927. Now, when Lemaitre published, he did get famous. Obviously, Friedman didn't, but what was he going to do? He had died in 1926, so he wasn't going to be able to do anything. Now, this model, actually, I'm not going to cover the Big Bang anymore because I think Otangelo's covered the whole thing about predictions, about how Gamow published a paper describing how radiation recombining. So I'm going to skip past a little bit of that because we already know. I think Otangelo's already conceded there that, well, I don't know if the word's conceded, but that the Big Bang does make predictions. What I will say about that, no, I'll get back. I'm sure I'll wait till later. So I'm looking for my next slide here. There's the list of predictions will go on, and I'll be happy to address more. But my point here, like I said before, is that even if evolution were 100% wrong and creationism were 100% correct, creationism still has exactly 0 practical applications. Evolution has endless scientific applications that we're privileged enough to take for granted every day, which is why it's taught as science, why creationism has no place in science class whatsoever. And I think I've summed up everything. I'll be glad to go over other specific things, but I'm going to go ahead and concede my time. I think I've said enough for now. Where do we want to start from here, guys?
You said in the last comment that you think that it is not justified that.
By the way, just to interject, I'm so sorry, Otangelo. Are we moving over to regular conversation now? Are we done with that?
I'm okay with that if Otangelo is.
Okay. Yeah, it was just about 5 minutes short. Just wanted to make sure that's what we're doing. Okay, beautiful. Okay,
Yeah.
guys, we'll go ahead and take it off into open conversation. And yeah, I think Otangelo, since you just finished, go ahead, Otangelo, take it away.
Yeah, I have no problem, Tony, with the point that you make that evolutionary theory can make scientific predictions. I have absolutely no problem with that. And I did concede that point in my introduction to you, but I think that the evolution creationism debate is more far outreaching, and it is about worldviews, about how do we explain origins. And there are many predictions that have been made in regards of evolution which are simply not true, and which have been refuted. And I think this is an important aspect which has also to be considered and put on balance.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. You're telling me what science is about. Science is about whatever you make of it. Science is a process by which we learn stuff. That's the scientific method. You like I went through in my introduction with the hypothesis. You form a hypothesis, you test it, and then you see if whatever you're testing does come true. Now, that said, it has physical applications. It's not just that it can make predictions, it's that we can take those predictions and do stuff with them. Like the Big Bang, because of the Big Bang, we now have computers and we have the internet, and we're able to access the internet with phones and all of that. So I do want to correct your view of science, though, because it isn't about worldviews. It's an operational. And that's the thing that really is bothering me. And this is something that I see a lot in creationists, and I can't nip it in the bud because it's already rampant. But you guys keep talking about, I apologize to use this from you guys, but creationists keep talking about operational science versus historical science. They are both the same kind of science. It's the same science. What you're saying is what it explains. Now, when it comes to operational science, we can make a prediction about the world, see if it comes true, and then use it. Now, operational science, well, if you're going to call it historical science, when we're testing something in history, we are still making a prediction. If we assume that this is true, we should see this fossil here. That is how we develop that history, is because we actually test hypotheses. And that is the same that's done even in your history class. Believe it or not, when people are writing history books, they actually have to go to primary sources and actually read letters. And if you do that and you study American history, it changes your perspective. But there is a lot that is lost when you go to the secondary, tertiary, and public sources. Anyway, the point being, science is a methodology for determining the truth. It's not perfect, but that's what it does. And your views are completely irrelevant to it.
Well, I think a very important aspect, Tony, is that Darwin predicted that we would find a gradualistic evidence of in the fossil record, which would demonstrate the transition of life forms. And for example, in the Cambrian explosion, there are so many different body forms that appear suddenly in the fossil record, and they do not have any precursors. Or even, let's suppose, the trilobite eyes, they are fantastic designs, and there are no precursors to these eyes. So I think this is, when we talk about the fossil record, an issue which actually falsifies Darwin's theory.
Okay, so what you're saying is because we have yet to find a precursor to trilobite eyes, that means that it doesn't make a prediction about that, and that we've falsified that prediction?
Well, actually, the whole Cambrian strata appears suddenly.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yeah, of course, they say 10, 20 million years, and that is enough time. But I would say in geological or evolutionary time, 10 or 20 million years, to have all that variety of different organismal forms and architecture is a very short time. And you know probably how much time that it takes just to fix 2 or 3 mutations in the genome. It takes millions of years. And in order to have an entire new organismal architecture, that takes a huge amount of differentiation and new information in the genome to make all these organisms.
Okay, here's the thing. Cambrian explosion was actually more like 40 to 60 million years, but we're not talking about just the Cambrian explosion when we say that it was much more gradual than that. You're saying that one day it wasn't the Cambrian, as far as our geological record is concerned. One day it wasn't the Cambrian, and there weren't all these phyla. And then the next day there was Cambrian, it was the Cambrian, and now we suddenly have all these phyla. And I don't know if you used the word phyla, so I apologize if I did. But at any rate, what we're seeing is before the Cambrian. In the Precambrian, we do see the precursors to what we find in the Cambrian. In fact, we find entire biomes that were not only flourishing, but flourishing like almost today's standards in terms of how lush the life was. There were no plants, there were no animals yet, and then there was a mass extinction just before the Cambrian explosion, and we suddenly see all these things disappear, never to be seen again after the Cambrian explosion began. There's a lot more biota than you're told about. I've done an entire episode on the Cambrian explosion and covered lots and lots of fossils. Anybody can watch that if they want to, and references are in the description.
Yeah, as I said, I think that what is claimed that the Cambrian was about 550 million years ago, and it took just about 10 or 20 million years to come up with all that variety of phyla, that just doesn't fit when you actually understand how long that does it take to fix a new allele variation in the genome. It takes a huge amount of time, and in order to have a completely new organismal architecture and plan, that takes a huge amount of new information. And if you take a evolutionary time, 10 or 20 million years, that's nothing in order to have all that kind of variety. So I think that what you are claiming is actually not so exact, not so true.
Well, you're actually wrong about mutations as well. A single mutation can wipe out an entire set of genes. In fact, breeding with somebody who doesn't share a mutation that you have can wipe out that single mutation in one reproductive act. What you really probably meant is that it takes millions of years for that particular mutation to proliferate through the entire population. And nobody's doubting you that. But this time scale you're giving, it doesn't hold up. That isn't exact. I don't even know how you're determining this time scale. I don't know what numbers you began with. I don't know how you quantified them. So give me your formula. And in fact, more than that, you said you have 6 things that refute common ancestry, and it's specifically common ancestry. I do want to discuss some of your other distortions, but I would love to see those things because I've actually presented a prediction.
Okay, I can list these 6 items. 1, the DNA replication machinery. Most of the core replisome enzymes and components are not homologous. Then secondly, the bacteria and archaea differ strikingly in the chemistry of their membrane lipids. 3rd point, sequences of glycolytic enzymes differ between archaea and bacteria and eukaryotes. 4th, there are at least 6 distinct autotrophic carbon fixation pathways. Since the claim is that this is how life began, fixing carbon, and the first carbon fixation pathways were anaerobic, this represents a major puzzle for proponents of common ancestry. 5, there is a sharp divide in the organizational complexity of the cell between eukaryotes, which have complex intracellular compartmentalization, and even the most sophisticated prokaryotes, archaea and bacteria, which do not. And 6, a typical eukaryotic cell is about 1,000 times bigger by volume than a typical bacterium or archaeon and functions under different physical principles. So these are the 6 main points, and they are recognized by evolutionary biologists like Eugene Konin. He wrote a book about these topics, and he is outlining them.
Okay, so I didn't actually understand everything you said. So here's what I'm going to do. Choose one of those 6. Any one of them. I don't want you to think that I'm taking the easy one. So choose any one of those 6, and that's the one I'll address.
Okay, let me link to this topic at my library so the audience can have also a look at it, okay? Give me just a second, please.
By the way, Tony, if you do have anything
Okay.
resource ways or related you want to share with the audience, let us know. We'll post it in main chat as well.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I did link it to the chat. Okay, let's take here the number 1. I will read the extended point here. The genome sequencing of cells from the 3 domains of life, bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes, reveal that the DNA replication machinery, most of the core replisome enzymes and components are not homologous. Thus, the bacterial core replisome enzymes do not share a common ancestor with the analogous components in eukaryotic cells and archaea. This pattern of lipid composition, which groups bacteria and eukarya together on one side and archaea on the other, stands in glaring contrast to what would be expected from the universal tree, which puts eukarya with the archaea prokaryotic membranes have only a few types of phospholipids, while eukaryotic membranes can have over 6 different phospholipids as well as other types of lipids. So I actually pointed out 2 problems here.
Okay. So essentially, I mean, you're going to come down. I'm going to address the initial argument there, which was about the DNA replicators, and there's actually several different ways by which organisms replicate. And no, of course not. A eukaryote will not have the same replication system as a bacteria or as an archaea. In fact, most of our particular reproduction system is based on kind of a combination of both bacteria and archaea. But we can go into that at some other time if you want me to discuss the origin of our sexuality. But as far as the homology of it, you've got to understand that replication predates life. It doesn't. I mean, it's there. We can, in fact, let me look this one up. It's actually Schimpanzee, I think his name is Jonathan Schimpanzee, and his and Gerald Joyce. They published a paper in the journal Nature in 2014, and essentially what they did is they just took random sequences of RNA, just RNA, and they let them evolve by themselves in a tank. And when I say evolve, I mean initially they began replicating all by themselves. They had no other mechanisms. It was just the RNA replicating. Now, here's the kicker. It would replicate into left-handed amino acids, and then when the next time it would reproduce, it would replicate back into right-handed amino acids. It's absolutely interesting the way that worked, but the point being there is that the reproduction predates life. So if there was something that predated life that could that reproduce, its same reproduction method would move on from there. And is anybody asking about the reference for that paper? Do you want me to go ahead and put that on there?
You can put it there. I am putting here a response in the chat. I don't think I have only 200 words, so I cannot put the whole sentence in the chat, but I can put the link and then I can answer to you in regards of replication of RNA, okay?
Oops, I think I messed something up there.
I can, while you search the
Okay,
paper, I will
it's
answer
up.
to you.
It's been posted.
Okay, my answer to that, Tony, is following. The very origin of the first organisms presents at least an appearance of a paradox because a certain minimum level of complexity is required to make self-replication possible at all. High-fidelity replication requires additional functionalities that need even more information to be encoded. The crucial question is how the Darwin eigencycle could have started. How was the minimum complexity that is required to achieve the minimally acceptable replication fidelity attained? In even the simplest modern systems, such as RNA viruses, replication is catalyzed by complex protein polymerases. The replicase itself is produced by translation of the respective messenger RNAs, which is mediated by the immensely complex ribosomal apparatus. Hence, the dramatic paradox of the origin of life is that to attain a minimum complexity required for a biological system to start on the Darwin eigenspiral, a system of far greater complexity appears to be required. How such a system could emerge is a puzzle that defeats conventional evolutionary thinking, all of which is about biological systems moving along the spiral. The solution is bound to the unusual. The origin of life, or to be more precise, the origin of the first replicator systems and the origin of translation remains a huge enigma, and progress in solving these problems has been very modest. In the case of translation, nearly negligible. That is Eugene Konin in The Logic of Chance, where he points this out. So even to have an RNA polymer of 40 RNAs, it would rather, instead to start self-replicating, it would disintegrate in a prebiotic earth.
Are you guys able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I think maybe your camera's frozen.
That's what it looks like
Yeah,
to me.
Tony's
Let me try
camera is
this.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see what happens. Oh, it's still frozen. Well, isn't that convenient?
That's unfortunate.
I've got
shutting it
another.
off and back on from StreamYard, so maybe.
I've
There we
got
go.
a second camera.
Okay, there we go. Okay, we got you.
You're well again.
All right, so let me fix that. My apologies, guys.
Oh no, man!
Okay.
I'm impressed. You got a whole studio going there, man. Multiple cameras and everything.
Yeah, this isn't my favorite camera. Okay, so first of all, he was saying that Otangelo was saying that even the most minute replicator requires some kind of complexity, and it's funny you should mention that because. Again, I will be glad to share this paper, and I will in a minute. I'll dig it up if you like. In 1959, Sidney Fox actually it might have been before that. Either way, throughout the 50s, Sidney Fox did a lot of experiments using amino acids. And just by submerging amino acids in water, he was able to get them to begin performing or becoming proteinoid-like structures. They were able to become replicators. There was no complexity there. They just happened to join together chemically, and they come together, and then they started replicating. And they even formed a bilipid layer, very much corresponding to human or even a real living cell. Were they living? Probably not, because they didn't have any kind of method of inheritance. Inheritance, we already, like I said, we've already seen that in that experiment that I referred to there, that replicators don't require that many nucleotides in a long chain to become replicators. They just require a few just a few genes, and they'll automate, or a few nucleotides, and they start replicating. So that's, I don't know where Otangelo gets the idea that it takes so much to make a replicator. Maybe making life, that's because you're adding other things. Now, I could talk about the work in what's called coacervates, which is essentially just colloidal structures. And I have that person's paper, I believe it's McNevin. I might be wrong. At any rate, what he did is create some coacervates, which were colloidal structures that essentially were their first observed and constructed, metabolism. As far as the only thing we've got most of what goes into life. Pretty much we've been able to synthesize in the lab. We just haven't gotten the exact proteins. And everything's a step. I mean, you don't go up to a puzzle and see that it's half done and say, well, it'll never get completed. Yeah, there'll be some steps going forward. And the thing, a lot of Otangelo's arguments is based on complexity, or on this, well, I can't figure it out, so the only other option must be God. And if that's where you want to find your God, by all means do it. But that is really giving up, because if you had given up that back in the day when people thought that the sun rotated around the earth, if you'd given up then, if we had given up, we probably wouldn't have computers, believe it or not, because those physical laws we've developed led to all of the physics that we use today. This idea that just because you can't figure it out means it's impossible. I don't know where human beings get that, but that is the kind of argument you just gave it. And I don't want to use the terms that you constantly hear, but you know what fallacy you're committing. So do you mind if we cover some of your arguments that you presented?
I would like to respond to what you just said, Tony. First of all, eliminative inductions argue for the truth of a proposition by arguing that competitors to that proposition are false, provided by the proposition together with its competitors form a mutually exclusive and exhaustive clause. Eliminating all the competitors entails that the proposition is true. Since either there is a God or not, either one or the other is true. As Sherlock Holmes' famous dictum says, when you have eliminated the possible, whatever remains, however not fully comprehensible, but logically possible, must be the truth. Eliminative inductions, in fact, become deductions. In our case, we have a very clear framework. Either life came by unguided random events, or it was intelligently designed. Now, to your second point, which you mentioned in regards to amino acids, I would like to illustrate you the amount improbable that unguided events would have to climb in order to be able to produce proteins. In order to have a functional protein, you need to have amino acids. In order to have the amino acids used in life, you have to select the right ones amongst over 500 that occur naturally on Earth. To get functional ones, you need to sort them out between left-handed and right-handed ones, the homochirality problem. Only left-handed amino acids are used in cells. There is no selection process known besides the one used in cells by sophisticated enzymes, which produce only left-handed amino acids. The useful amino acids would have to be joined and brought together at the same assembly site in enough quantity. There are 4 different ways to bond them together by the side chains. If bonded to the wrong side chain, no deal. The formation of amide bonds without the assistance of enzymes poses a major challenge for theories of the origin of life. Instructional specified complex information is required to get the amino acid sequence, which is essential to get the functionality in a vast sequence space. Amongst trillions of possible sequences, rare are the ones that provide function. Before amino acids would join into a sequence providing functional folding, it would disintegrate if hit by UV radiation. But even if that would not be the case, most proteins become only functional if they are joined into holoenzymes where various amino acid chains come together like lock and key. If that would occur, the tertiary and quaternary structure in most cases would be no function without the insertion of cofactors inside the pocket, like retinal in the opsine pocket forming rhodopsin. But even if there would emerge a functional protein on the early Earth, by itself, it would be like a piston outside the engine block of an automobile. Many proteins bear only function once they are integrated in an assembly line producing sophisticated molecular production lines used in life. But even if we had an assembly line of enzymes producing a functional product, what good would there be for that product if the cell would not know where that product is required in the cell? For example, chlorophyll requires the complex biosynthesis process of 17 enzymes lined up in the right order, each producing the substrate used in the next enzyme. But chlorophyll has no function unless inserted in the light harvesting antenna complex used in photosynthesis to capture light and funnel it to the reaction center. But even if that complex, chlorophyll and the light harvesting complex, would be fully set up, they have no function without all the other 30 complexes forming photosynthesis used to make hydrocarbons essential for all advanced life forms. Now, let's suppose that all this would assemble by a freaky random accident on early Earth. There would still be no mechanism of transition from a prebiotic assembly to cell factory synthesis. So you have a huge problem here, Tony, to explain all this by natural means.
Okay. Well, as I said, once again, your go-to argument is, I can't figure out how it's done, therefore it has to be God. You use I think you use the term eliminative argument, which, sorry, I'm not familiar with my, I guess it's been over 30 years since I took a law class or a philosophy class.
Eliminative inductions, but actually the intelligent design argument, Tony, I know what you want to say, that it is just that we didn't figure out, so it's a gap there, but suddenly maybe science in the future will find out. But intelligent design is actually a sword of two edges. Intelligent designs wins based on abductive reasoning, using inference to the best explanation, relying on positive.
You're not addressing the point I was going to make at all.
Okay.
What my point is not it's either or. The truth is, when it comes to something like a deity, your answer should be a question mark because you don't know. Now, again, we have seen historically over and over science encroaching on the world that you say is only, or that you have said, or that other people have said are only explained by God. Now, they obviously weren't explained by God. They were explained by natural processes, and we see that more and more. I will start with one thing here with amino acids. We have seen not only in the lab, but also in meteorites, specifically the Murchison meteorite had 19 of the amino acids that are used to build life. You talked about the chirality problem, and this is really funny. I've been hearing this for years, and I've covered it so many times that I'm so surprised I still hear the chirality argument. If you've ever taken a chemistry class, Chemistry 101, you already know that left-handed and right-handed amino acids don't react at all. They just pass right by each other. They don't harm each other. They don't touch each other. They don't connect. They just pass by each other. So if there's a right-hand amino acid in a sea of right-handed and left-handed amino acids, the right-handed ones are going to find each other. The left ones are going to find each other too. Again, after that, the entire argument you made from there is how this is improbable. Therefore, I conclude God. You're thinking that I conclude, no God, which that is not my position, never has been. My position is you don't have the answer. Don't pretend you do. And as it turns out, on everything that we believe, that we think we have an answer to, the only one that actually has any real world application that you can use is evolution. It's just a fact. If you want, and the argument is whether it's got scientific application. That's what the point of this debate was. I'm disappointed that you didn't want to go into that conversation. It actually kind of ticks me off because I really do want to discuss science, but you're doing everything but going into science. All you're doing is pointing out problems in science, and nobody is saying that there are no problems in science. So I don't know where you're going with your argumentation. Do you have any testable? You did say you had some testable predictions of creationism or intelligent design. Can you name some of those?
Life
Say that one more time.
Life only comes from life.
Okay, was that observed? Okay, did somebody say because of creationism, because we assume that there's a creation event, we assume that we will only see life coming from life? Or did somebody see life only coming from life and decided that was the explanation?
Well, science is trying for 70 years to falsify that life can only come from life, and it has not been successful. Actually, the contrary is the case. What science has unraveled is a kind of complexity which is far greater than it was ever conceived, even in the 60, 70 years ago, even 20, 30 years ago. What is actually being unraveled is that life is far, far more complex, and we discover layers and layers of more and more complexity. So the question is, why should that kind of complexity in the future be explained by natural means if we understand that complex factories and blueprints which make complex factories always come from mental origin?
Okay, you started on one subject and you kind of went off to the other one. What did you start off? What was the initial thing you said there?
Life only comes from life.
Ah, yes, that's right. The law of biogenesis, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. There is no such law. That has never been stated. What Pasteur? Hold on. Hey, I let you talk all that time.
Okay.
I let you talk all that time. You can sure as hell show me the same respect.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tony. Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's go ahead and take a couple minutes, but let's let Otangelo respond to it. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. So there is no such law as the law of biogenesis. It is an observed fact that we haven't seen life come from non-life yet, and that's fine. But you're abusing the word law. If you were to say the law, because the law is just an observed phenomenon. So if I said there is a law that will say there's no such thing as a mile-large ball of gold, well, it's not a law, but there probably isn't one anywhere, not a perfect sphere of gold. But, we will never see one probably in our entire existence. But there's no reason for that. There are no physical laws preventing that from happening. However, if I said there are no mile-wide spheres of plutonium, there would be a reason why, and that would actually be the truth. That would be a law. There is no mechanism we are aware of that prevents life from coming from non-life. What Louis Pasteur, what he disproved was the idea that life can come already completely into eukaryotic form, essentially, from dead material. And that's called spontaneous generation. The experiments they're discussing now are abiogenesis, which spontaneous generation is a type of abiogenesis, but the type of abiogenesis they're working in now is anything but spontaneous. It's more like incremental or gradual. But again, you keep coming back to this argument that if you don't know the answer, you need to favor God, when in reality, there's no reason you have to take a choice until you actually find out for sure, unless you want to add some kind of punishment.
Let's give Otangelo a couple minutes. Go ahead, Otangelo.
I would like to point out two things in regards of that, Tony, which I was interrupted to say that intelligent design is not only an argument of denying that evolutionary or mechanisms or abiogenesis doesn't work. It also is an affirmation, a positive claim. And it goes as follows. As intelligent design wins based on abductive reasoning, using inference to the best explanation, relying on positive evidence on the fact that basically all natural phenomena demonstrate the imprints and signature of intelligent input and setup. We see an unfolding plan, a universe governed by laws that follows mathematical principles, finely adjusted on all levels, from the Big Bang to the Earth, to permit life, which is governed by instructional complex information stored in genes and epigenetically encoding, transmitting, and decoding information, used to build, to control, and maintain irreducible, complex, and interdependent cell factory parks, and a wide range, millions of species of unimaginably complex multicellular organisms. That is a positive case of intelligent design. And to the second point which you brought up in regards of amino acids used for life have amino groups and carboxyl groups. To form a chain, it is necessary to have the reaction of bifunctional monomers, that is, molecules with two functional groups, so they combine with two others. If a unifunctional monomer with only one functional group reacts with the end of the chain can grow no further at this end. If only a small fraction of unifunctional molecules were present, long polymers could not form. But all prebiotic simulation experiments produce at least 3 times more unifunctional molecules than bifunctional molecules. So it's not as you said.
Again, what you just said, that last thing you ended with was once again a repeat of this is complex. I can't figure it out. Therefore, I have to assume God. And that's just silly. That there's no reason to make a decision on that. However, again, we do see nature and we do see science encroaching on it. And one of those things, this is where the big difference lies. Exactly what you just said about ID, intelligent design. It looks at what is discovered and then adds its own inference to it. I get it. I get that that's what it does. And I know that that's what you think people are doing with evolution, because why would we be having this discussion otherwise? I guess what you're trying to say is we can, with creationism, easily explain everything. And I am here to tell you, no duh. If miracles are in your arsenal, you've got everything you need to make anything. And you can even make things that aren't possible. So that said, let's go back to what ID has done. ID has
Let's let Otangelo respond to that real quick if you want.
I promise I'll be really quick because that's the preamble.
Okay,
to this
that's
point.
fine. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And then we'll let Otangelo go back. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So we were just talking about inference, and that is exactly what ID does. It looks at something and then applies an intelligent design explanation for it. But evolution takes its own explanations and then predicts what the next evidence will be, and then goes and looks for it and finds it and then throws it in the toy box. And that's when creationists come around and say, oh yeah, that's creationism. It's lazy thinking, and it isn't helping anybody. It is exactly what I said. Creationism has no scientific applications.
Okay, as I said previously, Tony, there have been made many evolutionary predictions which also have not been met. So you have to consider that as well. And now to the second point, the chance of intelligence to set up life is, in my understanding, 100%, because we know by repeated experience that intelligence produces all the things as follows: factory portals, membrane proteins, factory compartments, organelles, a library index, chromosomes, and the gene regulatory network, molecular computers, hardware, DNA, software, a language using signs and codes like the alphabet, an instructional blueprint, the genetic and over a dozen epigenetic codes, information retrieval systems, RNA polymerase, transmission, messenger RNA, translation, ribosome, signaling, hormones, complex machines, proteins, taxis, dynein, kinesin, transport vesicles, molecular highways, tubulins, tagging programs. Each protein has a tag, which is an amino acid sequence informing other molecular transport machines where to transport them, factory assembly lines, fatty acid synthase, error check and repair systems, exonucleolytic proofreading, recycling methods, endocytic recycling, waste grinders and management, proteasome garbage grinders, power generating plants, mitochondria, power turbines, ATP synthase, electric circuits, the metabolic network, computers, neurons, computer networks, the brain, all with specific purposes. Now, in contrast, if you want to take a minimal bacteria with 1,300 genes, that is the minimum free living bacteria, it has 1.3 million base pairs. And if you want to get that sequence by random unguided events, you have a chance of 10 to the 722,000, and we have 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe. So explain to me, how do you think that unguided random events can put together a nucleotide sequence which will be necessary to have a minimal genome, to have a minimal bacterial cell?
Okay, so first thing you said is that evolution doesn't explain all these things. We have never seen a natural evolution create I guess you said machine, you said factory, you said assembly line. And the thing is, those are words that are used in books that are meant for idiots like you and me to read. Those aren't the words that they use in actual peer-reviewed papers. They are not, in fact, factories. They are not, in fact, machines. They are not, in fact, assembly lines. They are organic molecules, and they are chemically reacting. Now, you could say we have never seen evolution create these specific items, but I challenge you to show me when you've ever seen intelligence create these specific items. So we are now at the same argument. We don't know how it happened. So why are you assuming God? And again, I'm not going to bother. The second part of your question or your response was, once again, this difficulty with the improbable. I live in Las Vegas, dude. There are there are royal flushes dealt every day in Las Vegas. Do you know how rare a royal flush is when it comes to statistics? I live in a place where the improbable happens several times a day. I don't know if you've thought about that. So calling something improbable, all you've done is say that, well, it's less likely to happen, but we're here and we can test the assumption that we are here because of the reasons that we predict. Again, I don't care whether evolution is true. I don't care whether creation is true. What I care about is what's scientifically useful. That's what I said at the beginning, and that's what you began this conversation trying to eschew. But that is what we're talking about, is what is scientifically applicable. You have yet to show anything. I mean, like an invention, a new discovery that was made by assuming an intelligence created something and then going and testing that prediction.
Well, as I said in the beginning, Nephilim 3, he gave you a number of artifacts which were simply copied from nature, because the technology in nature and the ingenuity that we see in nature is far greater than what we can invent. And so we copy actually what we see in nature. And that is a nice example of what you asked for, Tony. Now, in regards of... you
go ahead. Keep going. I just want you to make sure that, because you tend to go into a subject and then you go into a new subject, and by the time you get to it, I've forgotten. So Yeah, here's the thing. Neff's examples, as I went over with him, not one of those were discovered by somebody assuming that it was designed. What you're doing, like for example, with the feather in birds, he was telling me that was obviously a case of intelligent design predicting it. And I said, no, nobody made that prediction. They looked in nature, they saw it happen, but nobody assumed it was designed. And then he pointed out the genes that went into it. And, the thing is, genes weren't discovered until after the wing was invented. So no, intelligent design was not used to make that prediction. All you did is retroactively apply it to creationism.
Well, as I said in the beginning, Tony, I think that the demand of yours that creationism makes scientific predictions is, in my understanding, not necessary. Not necessary. I don't know what you intend to prove with that.
With what?
With that claim that creationism doesn't make scientific predictions. So what?
Then stop pushing. Maybe you're not the one that's doing this. And so if not, I apologize. But if you're pushing for it to be taught in schools, if you think it needs to be treated like science, then I have a problem with that. If you're not, then dude, you're okay with me. But if you're thinking we should teach it as science, I got a problem with that. A real problem with that.
Okay, I think that the whole issue that englobes the evolution creation debate is about origins, and that has to do with religion and with science, because science also tries to investigate the past. And as we have it today, methodological naturalism is applied to operational science, which I regard as okay, but it is also applied to historical sciences where design is excluded a priori as a possible explanation. And in my understanding, that is not okay. I think that we have to try to go wherever the evidence leads. And if the evidence leads to design, then why not assume or accept that explanation? It doesn't mean that we have to say who the designer is. This is an issue of theology and religion. I agree with that. But simply stop at that inference and say, okay, this is the evidence. Where does it lead us? And if it leads to design, then okay. But exclude it a priori, in my understanding, leads to bad science. And we see that all over, where at the end of every science paper, it has to be evolution no matter what. And that is what I have a problem with.
Okay, I would like to hear, since you have an issue with operational science versus historical science, which doesn't exist, but I've got a theory. And I'm going to use it operationally here. I'm going to test that theory. That theory is that there is no such thing as historical science. My prediction is that you won't have an answer to this question. Now, hold on before you get upset, Otangelo. If you don't have an answer, it doesn't prove my theory true. It simply supports my theory. Would you agree with that?
Go ahead.
Okay. So give me an example of a historical science hypothesis. How does one form a hypothesis to test history?
Well, I would not apply that approach. I would simply say we have the evidence, what we see in nature. Now, how do we explain best the evidence, what we see in nature? And there are not only natural explanations. I think intelligent design is a possible explanation, and we should not simply exclude it a priori. We should consider all possible explanations. That's my point.
Nobody's excluding God from the equation except for the few atheists out there, and most people who accept evolution accept the belief in God. So I'm not going to argue with that. I don't have a scientific bone in that argument. That's your problem. But again, you're saying that there is such a thing as historical science. Okay, since you can't really name a historical science hypothesis. I would love to know which discovery you think was historical that wasn't discovered by an operational scientific hypothesis.
Well, historical sciences, they ask different questions than operational sciences. Operational science asks how things work. Historical science asks how did eventually what we see in nature come to be. These are two different and distinguished questions. And historical science asks how did things probably come to be. And if we exclude one of the possible answers a priori, then we are inevitably bound to make bad scientific inferences, which are always have to be in one direction, which is what today occurs. If you check evolutionary papers, they will never say, oh, we saw a structure here which seems irreducibly complex. The cell has to come together, has to be functional all at once with all the parts together. That indicates intelligent design. There are no science papers out there making that inference. But that is the problem in my understanding. If science demonstrates that a gradual origin of cells to kickstart life is not possible, but that cell has to start all at once, and that leads to design, then why not propose it that in a science paper? That is the problem that I see.
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't like the explanation. You don't like that your explanation isn't being entertained. I've got news for you, bud. There are millions of creationists out there. Some of them have scientific degrees. Now, they can publish. They don't have to publish in a peer-reviewed science journal. They can actually publish in a creationist journal. And to date, even in a creationist journal where they're accepted, not one of them has produced a paper that could be used to generate a new product or to make a new discovery. So here's the thing. When you're trying to pursue this, the way you pursue it is by testing predictions. So here we have evolution, we have intelligent design, and I'll try to keep calling it that and not creationism out of respect for you, my friend. But at any rate, so you've got evolution, you got creationism, and you propose them. They both have equal ground, and then you have to test them. Now, with evolution, you can either test what you're going to see today. You can ask a question about yesterday, but what you ask is, if that happened, what should we expect to see today? There still is no hypothesis that has ever created anything from intelligent design that led to anything. There's no discussions. Now, you said why shouldn't that be given equal time? Because it has no application. It doesn't have equal application. It's useless. There's no need to learn it other than for poet's sake.
Well, I don't think that there is a necessity to make a distinction between creationism and evolutionary science when it comes to operational science. There you just test things, try to understand how they work, and it is irrelevant about how these things came to be. So why actually make that kind of distinction? I think it is only relevant in regards of history, and there we ask other questions which are completely different. It's another department. It has to do with different issues and questions, with worldviews and so on. And what you are asking is how to perform science in order to make testable predictions that can have a value, that we can then discover things and apply them to improve our lives. But I think this is a question completely irrelevant in regard to the evolution creationism issue.
Well, to me, it's absolutely in the forefront.
Just to interject real quickly, because we are getting close to the hour and a half mark, and I do have another debate to do as well. So maybe we could move it towards the kind of more closer to the wrapping up closing statements, because we do have about 5 or 6 questions from the audience, and that might take us at least 10 minutes or so. So maybe if you guys want to go ahead and take your statements, kind of move it into kind of your closing type positions.
All right. Do you want me to go? you want me to go first, Otangelo?
Tony, I think you were kind of about to go. So, I mean, yeah, by all means. I just wanted to kind of frame it more for our next statements.
Oh, for our next statements? I mean, I think.
Well, I mean, really, just to close. I just wanted to say to kind of frame it in the terms of a closing as opposed to just ongoing, so we can move on to our questions.
Yeah, well, I think we've come to the conclusion here that Otangelo and I both have different goals in our exploration of origins. He seems to think that, you know, since he can come up with a scenario that can conform to reality, that trumps a theory that can predict reality. I choose to go with the one that actually gave me Atari when I was a kid. So I'm going to go with science. I'm going to go with what I can test.
Okay. Otangelo, go ahead, sir. Mike's yours.
Yes, I don't think that the issue is religion against science. It is good science against bad science. So there is no competition in the two things. And that's basically it, Tony.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay, excellent. Well, we do have some questions here from the audience. So give me a second here. Let me pull them up. We just had one more came in. Looked like it was a little long from Redefine, or was it? Oh, no, Chris Keith. Okay, I got it. No worries. Okay, so here we go. Question. First one is from Anthony Maurice. He says, producing life in the lab would prove intelligent design, not prebiotic chemistry. Chemists purify molecules and use highly manipulated controlled conditions, and they still can't produce life. Go ahead and allow both of you to respond to that.
Do you want to explain? Well, you know what? I'm probably not going to be as verbose. The fact that we can't produce life, I don't know of any experiments where we've actually tried to create life. So, and I know that somebody's going to mention Miller-Urey. That wasn't about creating life. That was about testing whether or not the chemical constituents of life can be formed naturally. When it comes to controls, though, this is the thing that really bothers me. I don't really have an answer on, life. We haven't created it, but that is kind of that catch-22 that if we do create it, well, it's just intelligent design. If we don't create it, it's still intelligent design. It's like intelligent design doesn't make a prediction either direction. Then the last thing I'll say is the controls. The controls are there specifically so nobody comes along and says, like, for example, with Mary Schweitzer, she got everything out of her sample except for the cells and the iron that was in them. What she wanted to do is make sure it was iron that was preserving it. She didn't discover a method of preservation. She just figured out the role that iron had, and she did it with her controls specifically. So nobody came along and told her, how do you know it was the iron that preserved everything?
Okay. And Otangelo, would you like to respond?
Oh, I don't think it needs a response.
Okay, very good. Okay, next question we have from Nicholas Whitmire, proclaimer of Messiah. Thank you for this, brother. Says, Smoky Saint, question for Tony. Science of the gaps A, would you not rather wait for science to bridge the gaps before calling it science?
Well, I believe I do that. It's unfortunate she hasn't given an example where I haven't bridged the gap. I have a feeling what she means is since we haven't
it's a he. I'm sorry, Nicholas. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, Nicholas.
We get in a lot of trouble for misgendering people these days, bro. You got to watch that.
Yeah, dude. I work on the phone all day. If I call somebody and they have a husky voice, turns out they're a woman, I'm dead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I forgot what the question was, my friend. Sorry about that.
It's all good. I'll read it again. It's okay. He says, science of the gaps, A, would you not rather wait for science to bridge the gaps before calling it science?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Now, let me go ahead and give a full-formed answer to that. When you're talking about bridging the gaps, if you're saying concluding that something was true, that is exactly what we do. We don't conclude something is true. In fact, in science, nothing is ever proven. And I mean nothing is ever proven. Proof is a mathematical or legal term. And if you really want to get proof that way, I can give you the legal proof of evolution, but we're not here for that. I don't want to bring up a whole new subject. As far as the rest of that, you know what? The point is where we're making gaps. When you're saying we're covering, we want to make sure that we know it's true before we cover the gap. We're predicting the future, or we're predicting using what our assumption is. And every time that assumption is proven to make exact predictions, all we're saying is that this is the most applicable theory. Now, the public and maybe even the History Channel might present it as absolute truth, but no scientist will tell you that everything is proven or anything is proven, because that's not even a scientific term.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Beautiful. All right, moving on. Anthony again. Anthony has another question. Says, Smokey, my statement for Tony is he's completely wrong about the chirality problem. Proteins only used left-handed amino acids, and there is no natural mechanism in the prebiotic soup that can achieve it. Feel free to respond.
I never said anything about proteins and how they were formed. All I ever said was that some RNA that was left and right-handed, and that all left and right-handed molecules do not interact. That is chemistry 101. I'm not wrong on that. That is absolute truth. You can, as truth as it can be. That's what we observe in the lab in chemistry 101. It's not like I'm being told this and I believe it. I performed the experiments. That's what you do in chemistry class. So take a chemistry class. You will see that left-handed amino acids do not bond ever with right-handed amino acids.
Okay, thank you for that. And by the way, just go ahead and preemptive apology, because you've come into a kind of a creationist channel, so you're going to get lots of creationist questions. Kind of like when I go to modern day debate and I get nothing but hate from atheists. It's just different environments. You know what I mean?
Because he's like a devout Christian, though, isn't he?
Which one?
Modern day debate.
Oh, he is, but he has we have all noticed a very, very heavy atheist audience, but it's okay. We all tolerate it. We enjoy it in our own rights. It's all right. We don't mind. So, but we just give you a little bit of empathy and for showing up here and dealing with all the questions and having the debate, because we do notice that there is a lack of that in the public sphere. And so you are very appreciated. Thank you for doing this today.
Thank you, yes.
Beautiful. And moving on here. So here we have a question, Smokey Saint question for Tony. This is from, again, Nicholas Whitmire. And he says, most creationists object to non-science being taught as science. So why do you think we want creationism in public schools? We want common ancestry evolutionism out, he says.
Right. And again, as I've already discussed, evolution, common ancestry, they can predict the evidence ahead of time. We can use it. Evolution is used, every day to actually develop things, but that's actually another debate. We have uniformitarianism, which is used even though it assumes millions of years. What it does is it predicts exactly where we will find oil, as I discussed in the beginning. It predicts exactly where we will find gold, diamonds, coal, any of those minerals. That's what geologists use to find these minerals. So the reason why it's taught is because it's actually useful. If you go into a class where they teach 1,000,000-year-old Earth for geology, you're probably going to come out being able to actually do some geology.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for that answer. And we have one more, last one. Here we go. And this is from Chris Keith. He says, Smokey Saint, ask Tony, did he know Dr. Armitage was literally fired for his conclusions on his peer-reviewed work on soft dinosaur tissue? You can let him know he won his lawsuit, by the way. And it was precisely because of his conclusions did not support the current evolution paradigm. Feel free to comment.
Yeah, I know that Armitage says that. I know he makes that claim. The school was able to prove in court that they didn't fire him for any reason other than they had to eliminate the position. And the proof they showed for that is that it hasn't been filled, nor was there ever an advertisement for it. He was in fact fired because of budget cuts, but they also happened at the same time when he was preaching. It had nothing to do with the discovery. The school didn't even know about his discovery. Essentially, they let him go, and then when you say that he won, here's what actually happened. They did get a summary judgment on, I don't know if it was 5 or 4 different the different claims. 2 of them were thrown out. The other 2 were led to go on, but they were not punitive. You couldn't be punished for them. You couldn't go after the school criminally or civilly. So they settled out of court because as much as they paid him, he's considerably less than a good pair of lawyers.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And that was our last question for the evening. Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much. We rounded it out just about the perfect timing. And I want to sincerely thank both of you for your participation. And of course, your very competent testimony to your worldviews and positions. Thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to remind your friends, your neighbors, everyone else online about this very small, yet hopefully growing very quickly, little debate community where we hoping to really bridge the gaps and create profitable exchanges between atheists and Christians alike. So, gentlemen, thank you so much both for being here. Otangelo, thank you for putting this in action, having this today, inviting me to come on and mod, and thank you for putting this channel together. We all hope to have the best of success.
Yes, I want to thank both of you too, Tony and Smokey, for being at my channel. It was a pleasure, Tony, to talk to you, to come to my channel, and I hope that we can have other encounters and debates. I think you were very respectful, and that's it.
Beautiful.
I got to say, I appreciate you inviting me. I intend to be doing a lot more debates now, and this was one of those opportunities to cut my teeth a little bit more. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you both for being welcoming. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we're glad you enjoyed yourself, and we're glad you found the environment fair and profitable. So thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you for the audience, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye.